Welcome back to the show today. We're asking the question, why is the Western Conference so much better than the Eastern Conference? For a long time, it's felt like the Western Conference has had all the talent while the Eastern Conference had all the tanking teams. We're always talking about how the Kings do have a decent team, but them being in the Western Conference makes them look like they suck. Then on the other hand, we have the Charlotte Hornets, who may end up in the play-in tournament because the East is so weak. Ask yourself which is the better team, the Kings or the Hornets? It's the Kings. Don't be cheeky and say the Hornets. So what's the data on this? How much better is the Western Conference over the Eastern Conference? Well, last year, the West's win percentage was 52%, meaning the East's win percentage was 48%. Well, that wasn't really what I was expecting. I was expecting like a 60-40 split in favor of the West. But it seems that the Western Conference and Eastern Conference are basically equally skilled. Well, no, they're not, because we have to look at head-to-head statistics. Because remember, every NBA team has to play each other twice, once on each team's court. But they play each team in their division 4 times, meaning that the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference teams don't play each other as much. So the win totals end up evening out. But last year, when Western Conference teams went up against Eastern Conference teams, Western Conference teams won 55% of the time, which still isn't as drastic of a difference as I expected. So my observation is, the Western Conference isn't necessarily better than the Eastern Conference. The Western Conference is just more competitive than the Eastern Conference. So last year, the 10th seed in the East was the Chicago Bulls. The Bulls finished with a 39-43 record. And in the Western Conference, the 10th seed was the Mavericks. They finished with a 39-43 record as well, meaning it's just as easy to make the postseason in the West as it is the East. Well, no, because that's not necessarily true. The Mavericks had to fight for that 10th seed. The Suns, the Blazers, and the Spurs were all 5 games from the Mavs. But in the Eastern Conference, the 11th seed was the Raptors, and they were 9 games behind the Bulls. And then the Nets, the 12th seeded team, were 13 games behind the Bulls. The Eastern Conference had most of the teams that were tanking and didn't want to make the playoffs, so it was super easy for the Bulls to make the play-in game. The only teams in the Western Conference that weren't trying to make the playoffs were the Jazz and the Pelicans. And the Pelicans started the season trying to be competitive. But the best teams in the NBA last year actually did come from both conferences. The Oklahoma City Thunder finished with the best record in the NBA, Western Conference. But the second and third best teams in the NBA came from the Eastern Conference, those being the Boston Celtics and Cleveland Cavaliers. So last year, it was easy to make the play-in the East, but harder to get a higher seed. Kind of. Now, are the NBA's best players in the Western Conference? The Western Conference has better teams than the Eastern Conference, but does the Eastern Conference actually have better players? Well, no, but maybe now. Last year, the East had more talented players. If we look at the All-NBA teams, the East had 8 players, and the West only had 7 players. Now, let's look at MVP voting. 2/3 of the MVP votes went to Western Conference players. But in fairness, just about the entirety of the votes for Western Conference players went to either Shea or Jokic. So is it fair to say the West is better than the East because they have the 2 best players? And those 2 players are significantly better than everyone else? No, I don't think that's fair. But this year, the best players in the NBA are definitely in the Western Conference. Or at least that's what people are saying. This year, ESPN's top 5 players in the NBA are Jokic, Shea, Luka, Giannis, and Wemby. The next 5 are Ant, Steph, LeBron, and KD. You've got to go all the way down to number 10 to get another Eastern Conference player that isn't Giannis. So only 2 of ESPN's top NBA players are from the Eastern Conference. But what does ESPN know? They're just saying stuff. They don't have skin in the game. Well, the people that do have skin in the game believe the same thing. The sports books have Giannis as the 5th highest MVP odds, all the way at plus 1300. The likelihood of the NBA MVP coming from the Eastern Conference is not probable. But regardless, don't gamble. Or do. I really don't care. So right now, the Western Conference is better than the Eastern Conference, but has it always been that way? No, as a matter of fact, the Eastern Conference has been dominant pretty recently. Just 2 seasons ago, in the 2022-23 season, the Eastern Conference had a better head-to-head record than the West. And it was the same thing the season before that. I know why, too. Or I have a couple theories. The first theory is because Joel Embiid used to be good, and the Sixers were good. The Sixers were a regular season winning machine. Embiid was looking like Will Chamberlain. Now the Sixers aren't very good, so one of the best teams in the East is now not getting wins. The other reason the Western Conference became better than the Eastern Conference is because KD and Kyrie got traded from the Nets to Western Conference teams. Durant to the Suns and Kyrie to the Mavericks. And the Nets didn't finish the season by tanking. That Mikal Bridges Nets team was decent. And another reason the Western Conference got good is because they had successful rebuilds. Their draft picks ended up being good players. The Grizzlies became good with Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. The Rockets became good with Alperen Sengun and Jalen Green, kind of. A little bit of Amen Thompson too. And Oklahoma City got good because of all their draft picks. There are so many successful OKC draft picks that I'm not going to mention them all, because I'd have to add a GIF for every single one and a sound effect, and it just is tedious work. But this brings me to my next point. Why are Eastern Conference teams so bad at rebuilding? rebuilding. Detroit, by the grace of God, found their way out of the mud after 5 straight seasons of being below 500, which I guess isn't too bad when I say it out loud. But it always takes Eastern Conference teams longer to rebuild than Western Conference teams. The Grizzlies only went 3 years without making the playoffs. They went from the grit and grind era of the Grizzlies to what they have now. OKC had a 3-year rebuilding phase between the Chris Paul year and then the year they lost to Dallas in the semifinals. But at the same time, I gotta give credit to the Magic. They only had a 3-year gap between their playoff appearances. They went from Vooch, Gordon, and Fournier to what they have now. Well, I'll tell you, it's no surprise, but the real problem in the East are the Wizards and the Hornets. It's been 9 years since the Hornets have made the playoffs. There are no teams in the West with that kind of playoff track. But hey, at least at the time that I'm recording this video, or at least I wrote this script, they have the best offense in the NBA right now. But the Wizards are surely bringing the East down this year. They haven't made the playoffs since that season that Russ was on the team. So there just aren't as many perennial losers in the Western Conference. Except for the Kings. I do have to call out the Kings if I'm going to call out the Eastern Conference teams. If the Kings didn't have that beam team, they'd have gone 19 seasons without making the playoffs. So the Eastern Conference was better than the Western Conference between 2021 and 2023. But the Western Conference has been better than the Eastern Conference for 24 of the last 27 years. The East Coast just isn't as good at basketball as the West Coast. And I don't know why this is. It's the same players going from team to team. If you look at the Eastern Conference win percentages over the last 15 years, it makes sense how LeBron made it to the finals 8 years in a row. There just wasn't that much talent in the East. DeRozan and the Raptors were good. Paul George and the Pacers were good. D-Rose and the Bulls were good. But comparing them to the Warriors, the Clippers, the Spurs, the Mavericks during that era, they were not on the same level. I'm sorry, Eastern Conference team fans, but you know it's true. And we do know it's true because LeBron lost 5 out of 8 times that he made the finals over that time. If we go back to the 1999 finals, the year after the Jordan Bulls dynasty, the Western Conference has won 18 finals while the Eastern Conference has only won 9. To me, it feels like the Eastern Conference is ripe for a super team to group up. I suppose that's what the Sixers were trying to do when they cleared cap space for Paul George. But in my opinion, the East is wide open right now. Right now, head to head, the West is destroying the East. The Pistons should definitely make a move for Lauri Markkanen. They have the resources to do it, and if they don't, I think they're really missing out on a finals appearance. A lot of people think we should get rid of conference seeding in the NBA. Instead of 8 teams from the West and 8 teams from the East, they should just take the best 16 teams in the NBA. Conferences be damned. Because we have to watch bad Eastern Conference teams get blown out, while decent West Coast teams don't even get into the play. But hey, it's not as bad as the NFL. The NFL has 8 different divisions, and if you have the best record in your division, you're getting into the playoffs. You're in the playoffs even if you suck. In 2014, the Carolina Panthers made the playoffs with a losing record, just because the Saints, the Buccaneers, and the Falcons sucked even more. Even funnier than that, Carolina actually had home field advantage because they won their division and the Cardinals were the wild card. And even funnier than those two things is that the Panthers won the game. Baseball's the same way. The MLB has 6 divisions, and if you win your division, you're going to the playoffs. In 2006, the St. Louis Cardinals won their division with 83 wins, while the Phillies didn't make the playoffs, but they had 85 wins. The crazy thing is the Cardinals actually won the World Series that year, so maybe the Phillies would have won. The NBA actually did do something similar. The NBA used to guarantee all the division winners a top 4 seed in the playoffs. The first round, they'd have home court advantage, but Adam Silver got rid of that in 2016. Now the NBA gives teams so many opportunities to make the playoffs, I don't think the win totals at the end of the year really matter, East or West, who cares? If your team isn't good enough to get the 6th seed or win your way in from the play-in tournament, I don't think you can really complain. Your team sucks. Right, I forgot to record the outro. If you could do me a solid, the only thing that matters on YouTube are likes. I swear. I'm not gonna put the Patreon link in the comments. I'm just gonna tell you, it's patreon.com/whatslaps. I don't think YouTube likes it when I put a link in the comments. Thanks for being here. Be good to your mothers. Eat a corn dog.